Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. A very good morning to you, and you're very welcome to today's Signpost webinar. I hope you're keeping safe and well wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Mark Gibson, and I'm head of the Teagasc Outreach and Innovation Programme. This Signpost series is brought to you by Teagasc in collaboration with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, the National Rural Network, and Food Drink Ireland SkillNet. And today we're going to have a Signpost webinar with a little bit of a difference. You'll be glad to hear we have no PowerPoint presentations today. And we're joined by Professor Frank O'Mara, who is Director of Teagasc. You're very welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everybody.
And good morning, Frank. And we're also joined by Pat Murphy, who is head of the Teagasc Environment Knowledge Transfer Programme. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
So today we are going to hear perspectives on farm sustainability. And unfortunately, the Minister can't be here with us live, so he has recorded a piece for us. So we're going to play the Minister's recording first, and we're then going to have a Q&A session with the new Director of Teagasc, Frank O'Mara. So we would encourage you to send your questions through to us as soon as possible, or throughout the session today, rather than leaving them to the very, very end. So we're going to play the recording from the Minister, and we'll follow that up with our discussion then with Professor O'Mara. So Yvonne, if you could play the Minister's recording first.
Professor O'Mara, distinguished guests, I'm really delighted to be part of the 88th Signpost webinar. The concept has been a magnificent initiative to impart knowledge to agricultural and farming communities. The Signpost initiative is doing exactly what it says in the tin. It's pointing the way to a more sustainable future for our great sector. The agriculture sector is sometimes in the firing line for criticism by those who are not aware of the huge strides we have made, are making and will make in meeting our climate ambitions. As a sector, we are pioneers, and our farmers are leading out more than many in other areas. In Acclimatise, we have a credible and practical roadmap towards climate neutrality. Indeed, we are the first sector to have such a comprehensive roadmap. We now have Food Vision 2030, which is the strategic plan for our sector, which will guide us over the next decade. At the core of this plan are farmer and environmental sustainability. Indeed, I don't know of another sector that has an initiative like this, delivering high-end advice on a weekly basis to so many viewers. Similarly, no other sector appears to me to have to be in the fortunate position of having an organisation such as Teagasc to deliver research and policy-related materials so broadly to their industry. Teagasc and initiatives such as the Signpost programme will be the shining light for us to ensure Acclimatise and Food Vision 2030 are successes. I have backed Teagasc and its exciting research, and I will continue to do so. Farming, as I mentioned, is sometimes seen as the sole cause of our emissions. And this is certainly not the case, and it's certainly not the view of government, nor is it government policy. Unfortunately, what is sometimes overlooked is what agriculture has to offer from a climate change perspective. As we feed 40 million people from sustainable family farms, we will become more carbon efficient, we will grow more hedgerows, we will ensure biodiversity flourishes, we will protect water quality, and we will be the envy of the rest of the world. Everyone on this call can and will contribute to how, as a nation, we continue to punch above our weight from an agricultural perspective. We are world leaders, and it is down to initiatives like this Signpost series and the people viewing today that we will continue to lead the way. However, not everything is straightforward. The Climate Action Plan set a target of a 22% to 30% reduction in emissions from the agri-food sector. And let me be clear that this is a challenging target, but it is a target that I believe is achievable. It is a target that is in line with the Programme for Government commitment of recognising the importance of agriculture as well as the science behind our sector. It is a target that is significantly lower than other sectors of the economy. All sectors will have to make a contribution to this, of course, including agriculture. And this will mean stabilising and then reducing the total carbon emissions from our sector. But the old trope of cutting livestock numbers is something that I have never wanted to do, and is certainly not government policy. We must reduce our emissions, yes, but that does not mean reduction in food production or in livestock numbers. There are wins we can achieve in other areas while protecting output and productivity in agriculture. For example, we must use the knowledge that we have to hand to improve our nitrogen use efficiency. We're working hard to secure the derogation at the moment, and farmers and advisors must work hard to meet the commitments that have been published around this. Derogation farmers have a huge role to play in improving our water and air quality as well as our biodiversity. Under the new Common Agricultural Policy, we have revised eco measures and agri-environmental measures, and we will oversee these also. These will get us so far, but we need to change how we work too. There is a lot of change coming for both public and private agricultural advisors. We can't ignore the environmental and sustainability issues. They must be top of the agenda at farm level. Advisors and consultants are trusted by farmers. Farmers pay for the knowledge they deliver. Each advisor has a responsibility to challenge farmers too for the enhancement of their business and for the benefit of future generations. I will back farmers to deliver for the environment through schemes that will also financially reward them. We cannot forget economic sustainability. Farmers are facing economic challenges through increasing fuel, fertiliser and increasing feed prices. And it can be seen as an opportune time for advisors to shine in this area too, using science, soil samples, slurry samples and putting together nutrient management plans that can help to mitigate increasing fertiliser prices. Professor O'Mara and the rest of the team, I thank you all for the invitation here today. Our challenges might be great, but the opportunities are greater if we continue to work together. I wish you all a very happy Christmas and a safe and sustainable 2022.
And our thanks to Minister McConalogue for those kind words. And unfortunately, the Minister has been extremely busy in the last couple of days, given that the Dáil is wrapping up. So we do appreciate him taking the time to record that message for us. So if we could move to our next part of this morning's session. Frank, thank you again for joining us this morning. I know you've had to step out of some meetings to attend, come along today, so we do appreciate that. You have recently moved from a role as Director of Research within Teagasc and now Director of Teagasc. How's your first 10 weeks in the job gone?
Thanks very much, Mark, and delighted to be with you here this morning and with all your guests, and also really grateful for the Minister for his message in this webinar and his very positive comments for Teagasc, and I think his very positive comments overall for the industry, and I think it's really important that we take on board that positivity and that optimism, I suppose, for how we develop our industry. So look, you're right, Mark. I'm in the job about 10 weeks at this stage. It feels like some days it feels like just yesterday I started, and other days it feels like God, I must be at this 2 years now or so. You know, it's been quite busy, I guess. But look, I wouldn't have expected anything else, and really fantastic. You know, it's there's so much going on in Teagasc. Obviously, I've worked in Teagasc for a good few years now, and was well aware of the breadth of activities across both advisory and education and research. But you know, it's put you in a different position when you're leading that. And look, there's just so much going on to be proud of, and I'm really privileged and thrilled to be doing what I'm doing. So look, in relation to I suppose some of the milestones over the last couple of months since I took on the job, like one of the jobs of the Teagasc Director is to sit on the board of the CCAC, the Climate Change Advisory Council. And so I took up that role on the 1st of October. Now, I had been kind of shadowing, I suppose, Jerry, our previous director, for the previous month. But October was a really busy month for the Climate Change Advisory Council, because we were finalising the carbon budgets and the technical report that accompanied those budgets. And Teagasc, the role of agriculture and land use is very central to Ireland's emissions story. So, there was a huge amount of input that Teagasc was providing into the Climate Change Advisory Council in terms of technical information and technical modelling and so on. So that was really busy, and we had to. I think we had our last meeting on the carbon budgets on the October bank holiday Monday. So that's how I spent my my first bank holiday as director. We had quite a long meeting that day, just to. It was nothing particularly difficult, but just to sign off on the various final bits of the report. And then obviously, the carbon budgets led to the sectoral targets for agriculture. And, there was a huge amount of, I suppose, discussion among ourselves in Teagasc and with stakeholders and with government and so on in relation to those sectoral targets. And the Minister has referred to them quite a bit in his talk. And look, I'm sure we'll talk about them a bit more this morning. So, that to me, that activity around the climate change and the sectoral targets is going to probably dominate our work in Teagasc for the next couple of years. It's going to be a really important part of it anyway. So if I was to pick out one thing from the first month, or the first couple of months, Mark, that would be the thing, obviously, that would stand very much in my mind.
You mentioned that target of 22 to 30% reduction in emissions from agriculture. How achievable do you think that is, Frank? Okay, so a really good question. And look, in our view, in my view, and the view of my colleagues in Teagasc, including yourselves, would be that's a very difficult target, but it is achievable. We can see a pathway towards it, and that's a reduction of about 5 to 7 million tonnes of emissions off a starting point of about 23. So certainly a very challenging target. As the Minister said, it's the lowest target that any sector got, and that's not because people, felt sorry for agriculture or anything like that. It's just that it's recognised that emissions reductions is quite difficult in the agriculture sector. And the other thing I think that was taken on board was the very big negative impact on farm incomes and on rural economy incomes of a necessity to have a forced cut in the national herd. So I suppose our proposition is that we can achieve that target through efficiency and through technology on our farms. And we see it in a 3-stage, I suppose, roadmap. The first stage is to implement the measures that we already know about in the MAC that have been, in the MAC curve for the last couple of years that we've talked about, like improving nitrogen efficiency and switching to protected urea and using clover to replace chemical nitrogen and so on and so forth. And that's the first step. And the second step then is, to complete out the development work and the planning on a number of other scenarios that are, almost at the point of being ready to deploy on farms. And that's things like strategies to reduce the time to get to finishing weights in beef cattle. If we could, get there a couple of months sooner, it would take a lot of emissions off the lifetime emissions of a beef animal. There's also a lot of exciting work around additives to reduce methane emissions, and we expect the first of those to be on the market, in the near future. And I suppose, developing strategies for deploying those on farms and how farmers might use them. That's going to be hopefully happening over the next year or two. And we also have quite a bit of work going on other fertilizer or other ways to reduce fertilizer emissions other than just the switch to protected urea. So we've those basket, I suppose, of nearly ready technologies that over the next 2 to 3 years we'll hopefully start seeing available to farmers to reduce emissions. And the third step then is what I term the kind of more longer term research strategies. These are things that we're working on now, but there's still a lot of work to go before they're ready to deploy. And the two standout things there would be the feed additives that I just mentioned, to develop a version of those that could be used at pasture, because all the work really internationally around feed additives has been
to allow them to be used in an indoor situation where it's much easier to control the diet and so on. So obviously that's where you'd start first. But for us in Ireland, we need methane inhibitors or things that will reduce methane while animals are at pasture. So it's a very different scenario. So we're working on that, kind of slow release versions of these additives and so on. That's one of these longer term research strategies. And the other one would be the whole area of animal breeding. And can we reduce animals can we produce animals that have reduced methane emissions just because they're bred to do that? And, we've had some very exciting work published in the last couple of weeks from our colleagues in Grange that showed, that there is this genetic variation within animals for methane emissions, even when they're fed the same diet and so on. And that gives animal breeders the opportunity then to go and select for the low emitting animals. And breeding also has a huge role to play in terms of just improved efficiency on our farm. So improving the EBI or improving our beef genetic merit also contributes to reducing emissions. So they're the longer term strategy. That's the tail end, I suppose, of our pathway to reaching these targets. But our proposition is that through the research to develop all the additional technologies and the adoption of the current technologies and the new technologies by farmers, that yes, there is a pathway to these targets without a need for an enforced cut in the national herd.
You mentioned adoption there, Frank. That's probably at this stage one of the biggest challenges facing us between now and 2030. I mean, a lot of the research has been done on the existing technologies that are available, and we know that there are those additives in the pipeline. What do you see Teagasc, the role of Teagasc over the next number of years in supporting that adoption at farm level?
Look, it's hugely important, Mark, and I think Teagasc, in our statement of strategy, we say that sustainability is going to be at the core of everything we do, and that's absolutely the way it will have to be, I think. And now, just to remind people, for us, sustainability is a holistic concept. Obviously, it's the economic sustainability of farms first, because farmers have to make a livelihood. But very much to the fore now is the environmental sustainability and also the social sustainability. So I think we are going to have to orientate ourselves in our advisory service to really support farmers around the adoption of these technologies. And it's not just the adoption, right? I think we have a big job to do in helping farmers to understand the nature of these targets, why it's important that we achieve them, and why the strategies that we're proposing, why they work and how they work, and why they're actually things maybe not to be afraid of on farms, and that are I think part of a very positive future for farming for the future. So that's a huge job for our advisory service. Excuse me. And obviously the Signpost program is going to be the spearhead of that. And, we're delighted that we have that program established now, and we've over 100 demonstration farms around the country, and all the co-ops are involved, all the meat processors are involved, and many, many other partners as well. So look, I think we have a platform now where we have the potential for an all of industry effort around supporting farmers and involving farmers, indeed, not just supporting, they are actors in this as well. But in trying to get ourselves to the stage where these technologies are being adopted at a widespread level on our farms, that is the priority now for our advisory services.
And like we all know that climate change, it requires a societal response. What do you see as the wider role of industry to support that effort to drive adoption and support the overall, I suppose, supporting each other on this journey?
Well, look, there's a couple of ways, I suppose, that it's really important that industry are involved in this. First of all, there's reinforcing what we're all doing. So, you know what I mean? I think that the co-ops and the meat processors, they're very bought into the idea of moving towards a more environmentally sustainable production system. So, it's not as if there's any persuasion needed with them. That's the journey they're on. And that's the journey, I suppose, we're on. And it's very important that we're coordinated and reinforcing each other's messages. So that's the first, I suppose, reason why it's very important that we are working together in this. The second reason is that the processors, be they co-ops or be they meat factories, have a hugely important relationship with farmers that is different than our relationship. We've an advisory relationship with our farmers, and that's a privileged position to be in because we're very much trusted by farmers. But the co-ops and the processors, they've got a business relationship as well. Now, in the case of co-ops, usually, there's the farmers own the co-ops and so on. So it's not just a very, it's not a straightforward business-to-business relationship. But the co-ops and the meat processors are purchasing the product from farmers, and that gives them, I think, a huge opportunity to send the signals to farmers. Look, this is the way that we need to be producing milk or meat for the future, and in terms of how the payment systems operate, that's reflected in payment systems. And I know that's something that the co-ops and the processors are very interested in looking at. How can they incentivize or reward the type of production systems that we're going to need for the future? So that's the second really important way, I think, that processors, in terms of the signals that they can send and the rewards that they can give, it's a hugely important role that they can play.
And I suppose that there's also the input suppliers. They have an important role to play in this overall movement, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely. And very often the points of contact for farmers are the people that they purchase inputs from, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's feed, whether it's seeds, sprays, and so on. And they depend greatly on the technical advice that they get from the people selling those products. So again, it's I suppose really important that farmers are not hearing one message from Teagasc and a different message from the people that are selling them input. That we do have, I suppose, consistency in terms of the messages that we're saying to farmers and the advice that we're giving them. So look, we're very it's very important to be working with those input suppliers as well.
I'm conscious that a lot of discussion and the narrative throughout 2021 has and quite rightly, I suppose, has focused on climate change. But there are the other environmental metrics that we really have to look at: biodiversity, there's water quality, soil quality as well, which isn't often discussed. And I know there's a lot of work happening on the biological aspect of soil quality as well within Teagasc. But what would be your view to the work that needs to happen to address those issues? And is there a risk that we could take our eye off the ball with regard to those other aspects of environmental sustainability, whilst focusing, if we over focus on climate?
Yeah. So I don't think so, really, because a lot of the measures that you're taking to reduce the climate impact are the same ones that you're talking about to reduce the water impact on water quality and the impact on ammonia emissions, and can also contribute to enhancing biodiversity. So you're talking about things like I suppose reducing and improving the way in which we use nitrogen fertilizer contributes across all those dimensions, and that's a central plank of what we were trying to do in climate, as it is on water. So we maybe haven't talked a lot about the sequestration side this morning, but planting hedgerows and woodlands and enhancing our existing hedgerows and woodlands has a huge contribution, not just to carbon sequestration, but also obviously to biodiversity, and can play a very important role in terms of water quality, in terms of impeding pathways of nutrient transfer into water bodies. So look, all these things are interconnected. Obviously, there's some of them are maybe specific. So like a feed additive to reduce methane emissions probably won't do a lot for water quality or biodiversity, for argument's sake. So it's pretty specific. And likewise, improving maybe some of the point sources of water pollution won't have any impact maybe on climate change. So there are specific things to the specific targets that you might meet. But by and large, it's a package of measures that we have to be thinking about, that improve all those environmental sustainability metrics, and very much keep our eye on the ball as well, that they're contributing to the economic sustainability of farms, which many of them do. Like reducing fertilizer use and switching to protected urea both of those measures actually save money. Improving the genetic merit of the herd, getting more grazing days in, they're all positives from a financial point of view as well. Now, it's not that everything is positive from a financial point of view. Like, it costs you money to plant hedges, it costs you money to plant woodlands, it costs you maybe a little bit more to maintain them properly. So we're not saying that everything, is a win-win and trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. It's not. But by and large, the package of measures that you're talking about are kind of a holistic set of measures. And I kind of look at it like it's a set of juggling balls, and you've got to, you've 5 or 6 things on a farm that you have to be trying to watch now with relation to the environment, and keep all those balls in the air, but they are giving you the overall picture and the overall package.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's a lot coming at farmers, whether it be environmental sustainability, whether it be antimicrobial resistance, and dealing with all of those challenges. So I think it's really important that there's industry support there, and obviously support from the advisory services. We had Donal Sheehan speaking on our webinar there some months ago. Donal, as you know, he's project coordinator of the Bride project, and has been very articulate around the whole area of production and environmental sustainability working hand in hand. But he often makes the point about the lack of rewards or signals for farmers from the marketplace around environmental sustainability. Do you have any views on that, Frank?
Look, I do. I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a key role that the processors and of milk and meat can play in terms of sending those rewards. I guess the bigger picture, though, is how does the consumer actually reward farmers for the type of practices that they keep saying that they want farmers to adopt. That's the challenge. We've had decades now of probably cheap food, and maybe that's changing a little bit, or certainly the sharp edge of it maybe changing a little bit, and we do see more and more of our shelves filled with kind of premium type products. But that's ultimately where it has to start and from. That if these are the things that society values, and these are the practices and the ways that society wants its food to be produced, well, if there's a cost associated with them, well, then that has to be borne. And it's just the same as we see with other aspects of our economy. For instance, electric vehicles, there's a cost of those to the taxpayer because there's foregone VRT and so on. But that's the choice that society is making. And the same with retrofitting our houses. We're going to spend a lot of taxpayers' money in retrofitting houses, and because the payback to the individual householder would be so long that none of us would do it. So we are in the business now of making those choices as to how, as a society, we want to spend our resources or deploy our resources. And the same really will have to follow through on the food side, that if we're saying that we want food produced in a way that's going to cost a bit more money, well, I think the rewards or the cost of that needs to be passed back to the primary producer, or he or she needs to be compensated for the increased cost that they might incur. But the challenge obviously is to get a market that works like that, and that isn't dominated by people seeking to put stuff on the shelves at the very, very lowest cost.
I'm going to throw a big question at you now, Frank.
So they've all been big ones, Mark.
No, I'm only warming up, Frank. No, if like we're just coming to the end of 2021 and entering into 9 years left to 2030. Have you thought about what agriculture or farming would look like in 2030? Or what would you like to see the landscape? I don't mean the physical landscape, but the agricultural or the agri-food sector to look like in 2030?
Yeah, look, that is a big question, Mark, and just maybe as a kind of a lead into the answer, it's going to be a bumpy ride to 2030. We're talking a good bit about emissions now, but as you mentioned, water quality is hugely important as well. And next year, the likelihood is when the EPA are reporting on agricultural emissions for 2021, they're likely to be higher than they were in 2020, because we know we've had increased nitrogen fertilizer use this year, and we have a small increase in the size of the national herd. So they're the two big drivers of emissions. So look, it's likely that emissions will be up, and you can imagine here probably that'll be around September, October next year. 2022, 1 year after the publication of the climate budgets, and the figures will be coming out not just for agriculture but for all the economy, and pointing to an increase in emissions probably rather than a decrease. And you can imagine the reaction that's going to get. Now it may be the case in other sectors as well, so it'll really put the spotlight on the achievement of the climate target. So, but look, I'm looking at it as we're starting from now. So 2021, that's done and dusted. We really have to look at 2022 and what we can do in relation to that, and so on every other year. And look, I think, as I said earlier, there is a pathway to achieving these reduction targets. So when we get to the end of that pathway, what will we look like is your question. And look, I think we're still going to have an agriculture in Ireland that's dominated by livestock production, by dairy and beef production. Might talk about diversification in a minute, Mark, because I think that's an important area as well. But we'll still have predominantly livestock production. I hope we have a thriving tillage sector, because I think that is very important for our livestock sectors and for other industries like the brewing and distilling and so on, that we have that here in Ireland, and it can make a big contribution to our emissions targets as well. And so within our farms then, what are we going to see? I think we'll have to see farmers using a lot less chemical nitrogen and relying for their grass production or their crop production on clover. So taking nitrogen out of the air instead of taking it off a pallet. And also using the nitrogen that's on their farms, that they're producing on their farms themselves, the organic manures, using those to absolute best effect, and getting every last ounce of growth potential out of that organic manure on their farms. So that, I think, will be one of the big changes, Mark, that we'll be getting our nitrogen in a lot different way, in a lot of different ways than we are today. I hope we'll also see farms that have additional hedgerows and woodlands planted on them. I think we'll be very conscious by 2030 of what we're doing and the impact that it can have on soil carbon and hedgerow carbon, and probably be dealing with schemes and with ways of monetizing and capitalizing on that. So I think that'll be a big difference. I'd imagine we'll have animals that are, again, we'll continue on the journey of improving the efficiency of our national dairy and beef and sheep flocks. And but we'll probably also see fairly widespread use of feed additives to try to reduce methane emissions. And I suppose we'll hopefully see a landscape as well that, in particular on dairy farms, the roofs are covered with solar panels, because, again, while it doesn't directly reduce agricultural emissions, it's one of the ways that agriculture can actually make a few bob and contribute to our renewable energy targets. And look, I'm sure that there'll be many other kind of minor things as well, but they'll be the big ones. Like the type of fertilizer we use will obviously be probably dominated, or hopefully dominated, by protected urea or other low emission fertilizers by that stage. And so look, they'll be the big things, and the outcomes will hopefully be that we'll have reached our targets for climate change, we'll have improved our water quality, and our biodiversity will be enhanced. And that more important, I suppose, than anything from the perspective of the individual farmers, that they feel that they're getting properly compensated for the job that they're doing, and that farm incomes have also gone on a good journey over the next decade.
I'm just going to ask you maybe one more question, Frank, before we go to audience questions. And do keep your questions coming. We have lots of questions coming in so far. Frank, you mentioned renewables and diversification. What is your thinking there in terms of the development of the sector, and that adding value? How can primary producers extract more value from the activities that they undertake at a farm level, at a land level? We see a lot of emphasis on the bioeconomy, and I'd be really keen to get your thoughts on that, and what direction you think we need to be heading on that.
Okay, so again, just maybe to step back from the question a small bit first, I suppose one of the things that I certainly want to ensure that people think about Teagasc when I finish in this job is that we're a Teagasc that supports all sectors of agriculture, whether no matter what sector you're in, that you feel yes you're getting good support from Teagasc. That doesn't mean obviously every sector gets the same level of support because sectors differ in size, and dairy and beef are our two big drivers of agricultural activity, and the big I suppose numbers of farmers are in those. And obviously sheep is also an enterprise with a lot of farmers engaged in it. But so that means I think for us that we're going to give hopefully adequate support to farmers that wish to diversify into other sectors, and whether that's forestry or whether that's organics or whether it's growing grass for anaerobic digestion or whatever it might be, that we would adequately support that. I suppose organics is the one that's getting a lot of attention now because of the government commitment to increase the area under organics from currently I think slightly less than 2% up to 7.5% by 2027. And that's obviously a massive growth in that sector, and we need to be able to respond and support any farmer that wishes to go down that journey. I think all of us that are involved in supporting farmers in that journey, so that's Teagasc, it's the department, it's Board B and so on, we have to be very mindful of the market for organic produce. And also it's not just here in Ireland that there's targets to increase organic, it's all over Europe. So what we don't want, I suppose, to end up with is very disappointed organic farmers that have got in, or indeed are existing organic farmers that find that the market is flooded with organic produce and they're taking conventional prices for producing a product in a different way that is more expensive to produce. But I think it is a very important part of government policy now, and it's one that we hope to be putting additional resources to in 2022 and beyond, both in terms of the advisory and in terms of the research resources we have available to it. And forestry is obviously another key part of the options for landowners, and obviously going through a difficult time at the moment in terms of new afforestation and the harvesting of existing forestry. And look, the sooner that's sorted out, the better, because for our long-term targets out to 2050, when we talk about climate neutrality, well, forestry has a huge role to play in that. So we need to get that back on track. So I've lost track now, Mark, of the exact question, because I wanted to talk a little bit about diversification. But
yes, no. I think you've addressed that, and there are resources. I know additional resources going into supporting organics within Teagasc. Maybe we'll turn to Pat to some audience questions here. Lots of interest in our discussion this morning.
Yeah, I think a huge number of questions about that organic theme that you've just dealt with, so I won't go there. There's an interesting, almost philosophical question here, which I'll put to you. Which is the greater risk for Teagasc and indeed the sector in the current situation? Moving too quickly and leaving farmers somewhat behind in terms of speed of adoption in the short term, alternatively moving too slowly but ultimately missing our targets, or is there a happy medium?
Well, look, I don't think we're going to move faster than farmers want to move, because it's actually not, Teagasc doesn't move here, it's farmers move. Farmers are the ones that adopt the practices and make the changes, and we're there to support them. And our role is to ensure that they have the best information, and that any questions they have or any support they need, that we're there to provide those answers. So look, we're very conscious as well of what motivates farmers. They're obviously the first thing that they have to do is make a livelihood and a living from what they're doing. So look, we're very conscious of maintaining our strong relationship with farmers and where our role sits with them. So the other side of your question then is about moving too slowly. And look, there's a huge risk for the whole sector of not moving fast enough. And maybe I'd put it another way around. There's a huge opportunity for the sector by moving fast now and making some progress in the next year or two, in 2022 and 2023, and showing that agriculture is actually on a journey, on a pathway towards reducing its emissions and achieving its targets. And by doing that over the next 2 years, I think we have the opportunity to change the narrative and to be seen as a sector that, yes, it is a big part of Ireland's emissions, and there's nothing to be ashamed of in that, but it is a sector that's addressing its emissions and is on the pathway to achieving its targets. And it would be brilliant, to see farmers getting a bit of praise for making progress along that journey, rather than sort of being finger wagged at and told you need to change, you need to do this. So that's the opportunity that's there by making a big effort over the next 2 years to start adopting the technologies that we're talking about.
A question there, and a salutary reminder to us that the world doesn't start and end at Teagasc, that there is a bigger advisory support community out there. To what degree will Teagasc be supporting that larger advisory community?
Yeah, look, a really good question, and I'm very conscious anyway. I think in Teagasc we are conscious. Look, we're a big fish, but we're not the only fish in the pool at all, and there are lots of other people that have a very, very important role to play in terms of the whole the whole direction that the sector takes. And obviously other people like the private consultants play a huge role in terms of their interaction with farmers, and certainly we want them to have the tools and the knowledge when they're talking to farmers to be able to talk about the type of transition that their farmer clients might want to be going on or might need to be going on. So absolutely, we'll be working with them through this, and obviously our Connected program is one of the key vehicles with which we do that. But look, we'll have to work harder on that relationship as well.
There's a number of questions around the theme of the resources, the really valuable environmental resources we have in terms of our hedgerows, in terms of our high nature value grasslands, and pointing out that Teagasc is associated more with the development of the very commercial sector. What can you do to support the less developed, if you want to call it that, or the sectors where there is this high quality habitat in place at the moment?
Yeah. So look, that's when I think I said earlier in answer to one of Mark's questions that, I want Teagasc to be seen as an organisation that's there supporting all farms. And if that perception is there that we're just about supporting the intensive sector, look, that's not true actually. But I think we need to make sure that the perception actually reflects the reality that we support all types of farmers. In terms of farmers with high value resources on their farms, other than very, very productive pastures or crops, I think the whole monetizing of those is going to become a feature of the next decade. And how can we put systems in place around carbon farming, as it's often called, or identifying the habitats and features on farms that are there. And I think the survey that the Department of Agriculture, not a survey, it's I suppose a pilot project around establishing biodiversity and habitat baselines on 6,500 farms is an indication of what the government and what EU policy is I suppose thinking of. And the first step obviously is to know what you have there. I think some of our own work that we've been doing over the last few years in that area, people might have seen is reflected in the National Farm Survey Sustainability report, where we outlined the results of a biodiversity survey on our farms. John Finn's work that he'd been doing on the National Farm Survey farms, I suppose, to try to come up with robust yet relatively rapid ways of assessing habitats on farms. So we're very conscious of the need to be able to do that, and that's why we've had research in that space. And I think all between that and between what the department announced recently, you can see the direction of travel that's there, and we certainly hope to be in a position to support that and to develop systems and technologies that can allow us to assess and monitor habitats and the level of biodiversity on farms.
There's a number of questions in there about the potential role of the horticulture sector as a land use. What's your view on that, and what role can Teagasc play in supporting the horticultural sector?
Yeah, again, it's one of those diversification opportunities, and one that I see as actually quite an opportunistic one, and one that's very important for us. And we've allocated a number of new positions into that area already, and I think we'll be filling those early in the new year. One around peat alternatives for the horticulture sector, obviously a very, very important issue at the moment, and the other in the area of top fruit production, because we do see great opportunities in things like apple production to substitute imports into the country and develop viable businesses here in Ireland for Irish farmers and rural dwellers. So look, there are lots of opportunities like that. I think there is currently a review of the horticulture sector commission ongoing. It was commissioned by the government a couple of months ago, and that's due to report, sometime early in the new year, in the first or second quarter, and that should identify the development opportunities, and then we'll be seeing how best we can support those. But I do think it is an area where there will be opportunities. I don't see them generally as being big land using opportunities. It's not going to, they don't require a lot of extra land, like the Apple project that we're going to work on over the next couple of years. It could develop, 20, 30, 40 millions worth of import substitution, but it won't take a lot of land to do that. So they're not going to be replacing large swathes of our land with horticultural crops. I think that, it's more the niche opportunities and the high value opportunities that we'll see emerging. But they're hugely important in terms of the economic activity and the economic dividend and the jobs that they can bring to rural areas.
I think we have a question here just from a farmer that I think captures I suppose a narrative that we have seen throughout the Signpost Signpost webinar series over the last year or so. If I just read it, I might give you a break for a minute. It says, most farmers, by and large, have followed the advice of Teagasc and other government organisations over the years, and as a result, farmers are being blamed for more than their fair share of climate change. How can we, as farmers, be sure that the same organisations can get us farmers out of this mess? We seem to be going back to how my grandfather grew grass and grew corn. Has much of the scientific advice received over the last 30 years been unsustainable?
Look, a really good question, and we could spend the morning really on a question like that alone. Look, the way I view it is agriculture is on a huge journey and has been, for hundreds and thousands of years. And the way that we farmed when I was young was very different than the way we farmed now. And by and large, I think agriculture has developed using the best knowledge available at the time and in the direction that was required at the time. And I don't think we're going back to the way we were farming 30 years ago, because if we were, we'd have an awful lot of very, very hungry people in the world. I think agriculture has upped its game tremendously over that time in terms of the amount of food and the type of food and the quality of food that's being produced. And we need to keep that. We absolutely need to keep that, because food security is hugely important for the world, and we have a growing population, so we can't take a step back in terms of the amount of food that we produce. So the journey we're going on now with agriculture over the next, or the part of the journey, it's not like we're starting a journey, as I said, the part of the journey we're going on now for the next decade or two is a journey to find ways to keep the food production, very much the fore, but to do that in a way that's kinder to the environment. And it's very hard, I think, and very unfair to blame farmers for practices that have resulted in greenhouse gas emissions when none of us knew much about greenhouse gas emissions 20 or 30 years ago. This was not. So how can you be kind of blamed for something that wasn't a problem, in your past? But we know it's a problem now, so we have to go and address it. And that's why we have to find ways to grow our grass or grow our crops using less artificial nitrogen. And we know a lot of the technologies. It's all about soil fertility. It's all about optimizing the use of organic manures. It's all about drawing carbon or nitrogen out of the atmosphere rather than taking it off a pallet. And it's all about, making sure that when you are applying a bit of nitrogen, that the crop actually needs it, and you'll get value out of it. So look, that's the journey. I just see it as another, we've come to a turn in the road, but we're still going forward.
Yeah, and reducing that reliance on fossil fuels, I guess, is going to be the major driver of a lot of this.
A couple of questions there, Frank, in relation to short-term issues facing us immediately in relation to particularly fertilizer and prices of a lot of inputs. What are Teagasc going to do to support farmers through the next 6 to 8 months in relation to dealing with those?
Yeah, so look, a really good question, and I think that's going to be the dominant issue for the spring. Obviously everyone is aware of the price hikes that have come with fertilizer in the latter end of this year and that are in the pipeline for next year, and probably also challenges around supply and so on. So look, what we're doing at the request of the minister is developing a campaign to support farmers to maximise to the absolute the value they get from organic manures on their farms, and to make best use of whatever nitrogen that they have to purchase in to their farms. So our colleagues are working on that campaign. We have a series, I suppose, of mini campaigns around early nitrogen, around slurry application for early grass, slurry application for silage, and so on, at different stages of the spring as they're relevant. That's what we're going to be doing in relation to that. And look, I would say we'll put a big effort into supporting farmers that wish to put more clover or multi-species swards on the ground next year, but particularly, I suppose, species that are going to take nitrogen out of the air, because that is long term, I suppose, one of the ways that we can take a lot of chemical fertilizer out of the system. And there's probably never a better opportunity maybe to get people's interest in that. And I suppose for me, we saw last week, the impact that fertilizer and other input prices are, for feed and fuel and so on, are going to have on farm incomes next year, a very, very big impact. And if we were to take any good out of that, it is that whatever we do next year to spare that nitrogen and other fertilizers and get best value out of them, that we continue to do that for the following years, even if fertilizer, as it hopefully will, comes back down in price. So, always seize the opportunity, I suppose, in a crisis. So we'll be working with farmers to try to minimize what they have to spend on nitrogen by maximizing what they have in their own yards or tanks, and making best use of what they do have to buy.
A question here. You've talked about a lot of things that Teagasc are going to do. Are you going to have the resources at your disposal to allow you to do everything you want to do?
Yeah, look, a really good question. Obviously, we don't have unlimited resources, and certainly, I think everyone, including government, acknowledge that the role of Teagasc is probably never more needed than it is now, with all the kind of changes that are facing farmers. So look, we're certainly putting it to government that yes, there is a resource issue here. I think naturally you would expect them to kind of push back on us and say, well, look, you already have a lot of resources, and that behoves us to prioritize. So we are going to have to look at what we do, and I suppose see where we can manage our processes, or manage what we do, or select what we do in a way that we are putting enough resources into the priority areas. And yes, hopefully that will means additional resources, but it also will behoves us to prioritize into the important areas.
I suppose there's a kind of a theme of a number of questions there, and it's almost about a plea to Teagasc to assist in the process of improving the messaging so that farmers aren't being blamed to the extent that there are. Is there something there that we can do to support the industry?
Yeah, and look, I think where I would like to see Teagasc positioned in that is like the source of trusted knowledge. That we're the people that maybe understand the system, we understand the science behind emissions, we understand the science behind farming, so that if somebody wants to get the expert opinion on something, that Teagasc are seen as and regarded by all as a trusted source of that knowledge. So and I think I think there are lots of people out there, because food production is kind of so interesting to everybody and so intrinsic to everybody's lives. Everybody has an attitude and a view and an opinion on food, and very often they mightn't be as informed as you'd like on some of the intricacies of food production and agriculture's relationship with the environment. So look, we certainly see a role, for putting out the science and putting out the knowledge there in an even manner, in a way to inform the debate, and that we can and should be playing. And look, we obviously put the bulk of our communications efforts into communicating with our stakeholders, in terms of providing knowledge and so on. But increasingly, I think we do see the need to communicate to the wider public as part of our communication process. And we have a number of channels through which we do that, and we will be trying to strengthen those over the coming years.
Okay, there's what to me is a very good question here. Talking about farming sustainably, what are Frank's thoughts about promoting careers in farming and agriculture? And then there's an add-on question, which has actually cropped up a few times this morning, about the issue of gender balance and promoting agriculture and farming as a career for our women.
Yeah. So look, two related questions, I guess, Pat. And first and foremost, look, if I was a young person looking at, weighing up my career options, we'll say, I'd be very optimistic about agriculture. Agriculture, absolutely, food production is an essential part of the activities that the world needs for the future, and food demand is growing, and so I would be very optimistic that agriculture is a sector that's going to continue to offer career opportunities for young people. Obviously, different sectors have different levels of profitability and so on, and you have to go in with your eyes open in terms of how you might be able to make a living out of it. I think our education service and that is hugely important, and one that Teagasc will continue to prioritise. And the demand actually for education in agriculture, both in Teagasc colleges and in IOTs or technical universities or our universities, is very strong. So I think people are actually voting with their feet in terms of that opportunity that they see in agriculture. And in terms of gender, look, I think for us it's very important we lead by example as an organization. So we have like many organizations, we're pretty well gender balanced at the bottom. And if you look at, in particular, maybe across our research and education services, we probably have 50-50 or maybe even better gender balance, but maybe not quite as good on the advisory side. But the problem is, as you come up to the top, and look at me, and the senior managers in the organization, we are dominated by men. But I see it changing. There is a kind of a tidal wave coming, I think, of females in our organization, and I think I always encourage them to keep pushing at that ceiling there, and it will break. And for the wider agricultural community, and I suppose in particular farmers and people involved in farming, again, look, it is, I suppose, and has been male dominated, but we're seeing increasing women doing tremendous jobs in terms of running farms, and we'll give them whatever support we can, on top of, I suppose, the support we give to all farms. So if there are things like women-only discussion groups, look, I'd be delighted that Teagasc can support those. Women in agriculture movements, absolutely. Look, I think it's really important. I think any industry, needs new talent coming into it, and if you're only drawn on half the population for that talent, well, you're missing a huge opportunity. We have to see that our full population, males and females, or any other people, see agriculture as an opportunity and draw from all of those talented pools.
Okay, Frank, we're just up on time. I can't believe it's 10:30 already. Thank you so much for being so candid in your responses to this morning. And I know there was a few tough ones in there, but I think you gave people a very, very honest appraisal of the situation within Teagasc and the wider agricultural sector. So we really do appreciate that. Maybe you want to just say a few words to our listeners, given that it's our last webinar for the year.
I would, sure. Look, be very brief. The main thing I want to do is wish people a very happy Christmas. I'm sure whether you're a farmer or whether you're working in the food industry or working in a government agency like us or whatever, 2021 will go down as another kind of a tough year in terms of COVID and in terms of lots of the things that we had to deal with during the year. So everybody deserves a little bit of a break now. Obviously, our farmers will still be feeding animals on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve and Stephen's Day. So look, we really respect you for that, and our own farm workers do the same thing. So we understand that. But look, I hope everybody gets a bit of time to spend time with family and to reflect on what's important in life with your family over Christmas. And look forward. I would say, if you're a farmer, look forward with optimism to the future. 2022 is going to be tough with prices, input prices, but long term there is a very, very, I think, good story for the industry and a good future for the industry. So I wish you very good farming for 2022 and beyond, and stay safe as well, and be very conscious of the need for health and safety on our farm. So that's my message, Mark, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to your listeners this morning.
Well, thank you, Frank. And I want to say special thanks to our Minister for his recording earlier on and his support. And also we've had Minister Hackett presenting on the Signpost webinar during the year. So great support from the Department of Agriculture. And also I want to say thank you to our partners who have supported the programme as well. And particular thanks to our production team, Yvonne Maher, who's in the background today, Andy Boland, who is our series producers, and all of our contributors that have added so much to the series over the last year and a half. It's hard to believe that we're into our 88th edition of the Signpost series. Who would have believed that we would be here in this same situation so many months later? But look, I think we're all making the most of us, and we really do appreciate the questions and the comments coming through from viewers throughout the series. So thanks again.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.